Yeah, but VNAV, flight level change and vertical speed. I'll try maybe to illustrate that a little bit in the descent, and see the way I kind of maybe change between the three modes. Initially, I like VNAV because VNAV is kind of calculating a path from. I think it does it kind of the other way around. Actually, it starts from the runway, and then it kind of calculates the path all the way to the top of descent. So therefore, if you follow that at least at the beginning, then you know you're gonna be more or less in the correct place further down. Whereas like to kind of try to calculate it yourself with you can do like three times the height, so, and then add a little bit for the deceleration phases and stuff, but that's not really it's a little bit more like gives you more like a ballpark figure, as the computer will calculate a correct top of descent point. But then once you're further down and you don't follow strictly the arrival because you're on radar vectors or something, then that's when like flight level change or vertical speed gives you a little bit more control over the rate of descent, and above all with vertical speed, because you can adjust exactly your rate of descent. You can set, I don't know, 500 feet per minute, 800 feet per minute. During the intermediate descent as well, if at some point you're a little bit high, then you can use flight level change, use some speed brakes, and then that will give you the best descent rate as possible as well. So I think higher up, more like VNAV, because the VNAV has calculated the whole descent profile, and initially it's kind of putting you into a reasonable place to follow the VNAV profile, but then further down, from like mid descent to further down, then flight level change and vertical speed gives you more like control over the descent. And as I said, once you kind of leave sometimes the arrival itself because of radar vectors or shortcut, or then those two modes, vertical speed and flight level change, are a little bit better. So at this stage the arrival is now in the FMC, so once you put your arrival in, the ETA and the fuel on arrival will be a little bit different. So far, if you go to progress page and then position report, the last waypoint in Greenwich, we were there at 1901. I didn't take up the takeoff time, so it's hard to see with the navigation log, but with we've got the fuel at the position, which was 13.4. If you go to the flight plan, at Greenwich we were supposed to have 13 tons of fuel there, as you can see, Greenwich. So we saved 400 kilos of fuel so far, so the fuel burn is good. It looks like with cost index 120 and PFPX there, it's working out quite good. Now the flight plans, actually, the way I do the flight plan is pretty much the way the flight dispatch department, the dispatcher basically would do the flight plan. So the flight plans are obviously done with a program, with the software. It's not done manually, so the computer would churn out flight plans. The dispatcher has a quick look, decides if according to the weather, for example, if it needs a little bit more fuel, but as the captain of the flight, then you have the final responsibility for the fuel. So if you feel like you need to take more fuel because of weather, because of air traffic control, you anticipate maybe a little bit of holding or anything like that, then it's your final decision. dispatch will be quite cooperative in that sense. They'll know when fuel needs to be added up for weather or for air traffic control or anything like that. But yeah, the final responsibility is yours. Obviously, all companies in the world will kind of not chase the pilots or put pressure on the pilots to take just the minimum of amount of fuel, but they will encourage you when it's not necessary to kind of just stick to the flight plan. Don't take fuel all the time, extra fuel all the time when there's not necessarily a need for it. If the weather is good, if you go to a big airport with several runways and all that stuff, then you just stick to what you have in the flight plan. And it's true that 99.5% of the time it works alright. So, but yeah, as I said, the final decision is the pilot's. So. No, I mean they don't want to be seen as putting too much pressure. So no, the pressure, I wouldn't say there's any pressure, but to prevent diversion, what I was touching on a few weeks ago was if you go to a place and you're close to your diversion fuel. So if you look at the flight plan, for example, for today, just to try to illustrate my point. So you get close to destination, and today, for example, the diversion fuel, as I call it, is 6.5 tons. So you'll be close to destination, you're a little bit unsure, there's maybe a little bit of holding, or after holding you think that your approach is gonna burn more fuel, and you're gonna basically land below the 6.5. You can concentrate on your destination airport instead of straight away saying, oh, I don't have enough fuel to make it to my destination. I'm gonna be landing, let's say, with 6 tons, so I need to divert straight away. No, you can't. What you can do is say, okay, I'm concentrating on the arrival on the destination airport, and I'll use some of the diversion fuel to allow for like a longer approach or more fuel burned to stick to the destination instead of diverting straight away. Because what you've got to realize is that when you go around from the ILS and you're strictly on your diversion fuel, so 6.5, and you go around at like your ILS minima, if you then divert to San Diego, for example, by the time you get to San Diego, then you're gonna get there with your final reserve, your 3.3. There's no more extra fuel in the fuel to go to San Diego. It's just exactly what you need, and by the time you get to San Diego, you're gonna be very close to the final reserve, and the final reserve is then a fuel emergency situation. So when you're gonna get to San Diego, basically you're stuck in San Diego and you have no more options. Not something to bear in mind. So that's why you can use some of this fuel to kind of stick around at your destination. Does it make sense? But once again, the procedure is clear. You know, first is minimum fuel, then is the Mayday fuel. So before you get into a fuel emergency situation, then you can call for, like, you say, okay, I'm on minimum fuel, so that means to air traffic control that any changes to the current clearance, whatever the situation is. For example, you're on downwind, you expect like a turn to base soon and then to establish on the ILS and land. If there's any changes to that, then you might go into the final reserve, the last 30 minutes, and then get into a fuel emergency. So you can say, okay, minimum fuel, so they know. Or if you, for example, on a final approach, and you say, okay, I'm landing, but if you make me go around, then I'm gonna be into a fuel emergency. So you're on final approach, and you say to the air traffic control, you say, okay, minimum fuel now, so don't make me go around, because if you make me go around, then I'm gonna be in a fuel emergency situation. So there's kind of a couple of steps like this where you can preempt the situation a little bit, kind of say, hey, hold on, this is the situation now, don't mess around with me. Personally, what I like to do is unfly the departure. Above all, if I fly out of base, I'm kind of familiar with the departures and stuff. So I like to fly manually the departure, maybe up to 5, 6, 7,000 feet. On the arrival, I tend to be a little bit more conservative, above all if I go to places I don't necessarily know. And I do find the autopilot as well does a better job. Actually, I mean, you do control obviously what the autopilot does, but I do find it does a little bit of a better job. And then obviously you kind of disconnect the autopilot maybe at like 1500 feet or something and do the last bit manually, but at least once things are all settled down. Because when you fly manually, you kind of take away some of your mental capacity to kind of manage the rest. So yeah, when on approach, I tend to be a little bit more kind of on the cautious side and kind of keep the autopilot on to get a bit more like mental capacity around. But definitely the last 1,000 feet on the approach, once everything is settled down and maybe not necessarily clear to land, but at least the aircraft is configured, you've done the checklist, everything is sorted out, then yeah, you can disconnect and fly the last 3 miles maybe manually. That's what I do. I think a lot of guys do it like that. I mean, I see the way the FOs fly. I mean, some guys they put the autopilot on at like 500 feet on the way up and disconnect at like 500 feet on the way down. So some guys use the autopilot even more. So. The Mach number, why it's different. The Mach number is actually is what it is. I know it's maybe an easy thing to say, but the Mach number, like and the cruise, is mostly dependent on the cost index. So you can see at the moment the Mach number is decimal A36. If you change the cost index to, let's say, 10, then the cost index is gonna change. You see decimal A21. Then on a long flight as well, what happens if you don't climb is that as you go along, the Mach number is gonna reduce, because then to be as economical as it can, it has to reduce the speed. If it keeps the speed up when it's supposed to climb and you stay at the one level you've been at all the time, then it needs to reduce the speed a little bit. But from a kind of basic point of view, yeah, the Mach number is dependent on the cost index. So the higher the cost index, the higher the Mach number is gonna be, and vice versa. And the difference here, actually, I've showed between 120, which is simulated here as decimal 836, which is possibly, I mean, the numbers change depending on the temperature, on the winds, on the wind component above all, not so much the wind, but yeah, the wind component. If it's a headwind, the Mach number for a given cost index is going to be greater than for a tailwind, because with a tailwind the system is gonna kind of benefit from the tailwind and not look for like so much forward speed in the air, if that makes sense. Yeah, then for cost index 10, as I was showing a reduction at decimal 82 something It's quite realistic. Cost index 10 will give you around decimal 82. Yeah.
Descent checklist. Recall. Checked. Notes.
Checked.
Auto brake level 3. Landing data.
VRF is 145, minimums 330 feet. VRF is 145, minimums 330 feet.
VREF 145. Minimums 330 feet. Approach briefing.
Completed.
Descent checklist complete.
The econ, we've lost it now, mind you, but and the cruise, yeah, it's gone now. But in the cruise, the econ is linked to the cost index. So if you don't want to burn too much fuel, then you'll go for a low cost index, and the econ speed will be relatively low. Like I showed earlier on with in the simulator here, with cost index 10, the Mach number was around decimal 821, I think, or something like that. So let's say decimal 82, and that's the econ speed. So the econ speed is linked to the cost index, and the lower the cost index, then the lower the Mach number is gonna be. So at 18,000 feet, we're already past the transition level. I'll actually tell FS the crew. Transition level, altimeters reset 2997.
2997. Set.
Perfect, picked up the voice. Oh, the hills of California down here. Amazing. Yeah, Aivlasoft is a little bit similar to Navigraph. I think Navigraph use now the Jeppesen charts. So obviously the Jeppesen charts are the real charts that are used by many airlines around the place, and they allow you, I think, as well to connect the simulator to the chart so that you can see the plane moving on the chart and stuff. Yeah, which I think can be done as well with the real world EFB on the aircraft. You can kind of have moving maps and things like that. That's a lot of flying, FP. Wow. Merci, Nick. Thanks. So you see, for the moment, I'm mostly using VNAV because it kind of does a good job. Strato kind of takes into account
to level off.
all the constraints, either like the speed constraints or the level constraints. The VNAV does a relatively good job. You may have to help it a little bit with the speed brakes from time to time, like I'm doing now. I'm going to use a little bit of speed brake to help slow down, but otherwise for the vertical profile it's going to be good. It's going to cross Simon there more or less at 12,000 feet. Whereas if you had to calculate that with fly level change of vertical speed, then it will be a nightmare. So that's the plus of VNAV, is that it calculates all the constraints, either speed or level constraints on the arrival. Kind of calculates it very well. If you see, for example, as I said, with the speed it doesn't work out 100%, then you can adapt with the speed brake a little bit. So yeah, Simon, 12,000 feet, 250 knots, so bang on. The automation is going into speed mode. Possibly because the descent path now is a little bit more shallow, so to keep the speed it needs to add a little bit of thrust. If the descent path was calculated so that the aircraft could achieve the descent with idle thrust and maintain the speed, then it would stay on hold as it was early on initially in the descent, but now that the descent path is shallower and needs to add a better thrust. See, at the moment there's about 70, roughly 70% of thrust. But now it's adding up too much, it's going. So, it's nothing to look outside. It's quite cloudy actually. But it's not doing now it's starting to come back on the thrust because it's too much speed and it was adding thrust. So 10,000 feet at base, which is going to work out as well quite nicely. Then it's 7,000 feet or above at Santa Monica, so I can basically choose any altitude I want at that stage. Approach checklist.
Approach checklist. Altimeters.
2997 set.
2997. Approach checklist complete. 10,000 feet.
So yeah, now I'll go fly level change, maybe keep 250 knots. That was the FMC reducing at 240
Cabin crew
below
prepare
10.
for landing.
And now because I've got 7,000 feet here anyway, I know that I'm not gonna go lower than 7,000 feet. Even if the descent I'm creating there is maybe gonna be faster, I don't know. But because I've got 7,000 feet here in the altitude window, it's gonna protect me against the 7,000 here at Santa Monica. Otherwise, if I don't want to go down so quick with the flight level change, then I can go vertical speed. At the moment it's giving me 1500 and I can reduce it, let's say, to 900 feet per minute. And then with the green banana, as I call it there, the altitude range arc, you can see more or less where you're gonna reach 7,000 feet there. At the moment it's changing a little bit with the speed and stuff. Yeah, does it make sense? You can see just about approaching Santa Monica there on the display. It's quite nice, and then radar vectors. So then I'll kind of vector around myself.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be arriving at our destination shortly. If you are making a connection to another flight.
So we'll take the reference bug down to heading.
1,000 feet to level off.
Go heading select. Continue on 085 initially. And now we pass Santa Monica, so we can go down to 4,000 feet. Take a bit of a left turn to go downwind. Kind of follow the track anyway that was there. And now I can go fly level change because I want to try to expedite the descent a little bit. So vertical speed is giving me a rate, a fixed rate of descent, which you can preset here. But if you go fly level change, then It gives you the maximum rate of descent for the speed you command, and then you can of course help it with the speed brakes. So Mercy 4,000 feet, so it's looking good actually. The green banana there is kind of sitting just before I be Mercy. Then we can come back on the speed and then configure. So for the profile vertically looks quite good. Probably on top of LA now. Yeah. So LA is a frame killer as well. Huh? Probably not. So I'll try not to look outside too much. Come back on the speed as well. It doesn't, with the wind variations, it's not doing a great job. In the US it's 250 compulsory below 10, so unless they obviously waive the restriction, but you need to ask for it. If it's not granted, then it's a compulsory 250 below 10. So the weather is quite well simulated. There's a lot of variation in the speed, maybe a little bit bumpy weather. Maybe, mind you, it's only 18 degrees, but with the hills around, it's maybe a little bit bumpy as the stadium here. Los Angeles for you. The visibility as well is quite well simulated. It's a little bit hazy. So we're gonna come back on the speed now for the base turn. So obviously here, if you had the ETC, then you have to comply with the speeds which are requested, but otherwise here at the moment, then I can do pretty much what I want. So obviously when you reduce the speed, as I explained many times before, the
1,000 feet
nose
to
has
level off.
to go up, so the rate of descent decreases. And then once you get to the commanded speed, then you can the automatics kind of lower the nose again. Now I can take vertical speed again, because otherwise I'm gonna be a little bit low. So yeah, vertical speed and fly level change kind of help a little bit get more control over the descent. Flaps 1.
Speed check, flaps 1.
Can turn. Base leg. Flaps 5.
Speed check, flaps 5.
I'm probably gonna level off, to be honest, here, but everything's still working, huh? Please let me know. You can see the glide slope is above at the moment, so it's all good. Alright, and we're gonna take the turn to intercept, say 220, and arm the approach. Localizer is captured. Alt, so no continuous descent approach. That's not the end of the world. 16 miles out, it's very far actually. Flaps 15.
Speed check flaps 15.
Excellent, perfect, thanks. So as soon as you command the speed below the flap 5 bug speed there, even if it's just a few knots below, you need to go to the lower flap stage. So flaps 15, but don't reduce the speed all the way. And glide slope capture 2000 feet set. I'll try to come back on the speed a little bit. But then on the ILS it's quite slippery here, so let's hope it's gonna keep the speed, otherwise I'll drop the gear. That's it. Final approach over LA. Yeah, I'm gonna have to drop the gear, I think, because the speed is building up. Gear down.
Gear down.
Flaps 20.
Speed check flaps 20.
See you in FB, thanks.
2500.
Cabin crew, take your seats.
Yeah, it's quite hazy. Flaps 30. Flaps 30.
Speed check flaps 30.
Landing checklist.
Landing checklist. Landing checklist complete.
Actually, it wasn't. You see, that's a little thing as well with the Festa Cruise that it reads landing checklist, but the checklist was not actually complete by that stage. But you can see now the flaps are set to 30, so that's good. Anticipated the checklist a tiny bit, but the software just reads the checklist. We're just about seeing the runway now at 5.5 miles, which is more or less correct. The weather was 8 statute miles, so
Approach stable.
1000.
flight director.
Approaching minimums.
Approaching minimums. Minimums.
Minimums.
Landing.
Checked.
One 100. 50. 30. 20. 10.
with the frames like always. Oof.
Speed brakes up. Reversers normal. $60 knots.
Right, you. Manual braking.
Check.
We'll go to the next exit. Woohoo, here we are, KLAX. Very nice. Right. So here you need to check that there's nobody taking off. I know there's nobody because I'm on my own. Otherwise, you will need clearance to cross. Very important because this runway here is a takeoff runway, so you can't just vacate and cross. Alright, and here we'll turn on Echo. Oop. A good thing with FS2 crew, which is actually the signal as well in the real world, is that for the captain to retract the speed brake is a signal for the first officer, or for the pilot flying, depending on who's cleaning up the aircraft. But basically, for the pilot monitoring to clean up the aircraft, so retract the flaps, switch the lights in the correct configuration, and all that stuff. Alright, so we'll go down here on Echo.